Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Serena Irani. I am a digital accessibility specialist at the Disability Equity Office, which is part of the Equity, Civil Rights, and Title IX office here at U of M. Today, we are going to be talking about how to design and share accessible Google Docs. So, our agenda for today's workshop: the University of Michigan is committed to fostering an inclusive environment where accessibility and the needs of individuals with disabilities are prioritized, ensuring equitable opportunities for all members of our diverse community. This workshop will cover a brief intro to digital accessibility, accessibility best practices for documents, and then a demo of how to apply these best practices within Google Docs and using the Grackle Docs extension tool. Finally, we will leave some time at the end for Q&A. Okay, so to start things off, I'm going to give a little context for what we mean when we say digital accessibility. Digital accessibility is about making sure that digital information and experiences can be accessed, participated in, understood, and made use of by all. The way we do this is by centering our guidelines and design best practices around the needs of users with disabilities. And because so much of the work that we do here at this university is conducted online, digital accessibility applies to pretty much everything you can think of. So, websites and applications, documents, presentations, spreadsheets, communications and events, and much, much more. We're going to cover a lot of concepts and tools today. And one resource to help you navigate this work at a high level is the U of M Digital Accessibility website, or accessibility.umich.edu. This is the place to go if you want U of M specific information on accessibility concepts, resources, upcoming training and workshop opportunities, and what tools and services are available to help you all with this work. All of the resources and tools and pathways for support that we're going to talk about today, you can also find on the accessibility website. So be sure to check that out. Okay, moving on now to document accessibility best practices. So starting out with alt text. So to have an accessible image, you need to include a text description or a text alternative along with it. We usually call this alt text for short. Alt text is a way for people who are not sighted or who can't see very well to be able to understand what is going on in the image you added to your slide deck or your document or your email. If someone is using assistive tech, like a screen reader, the alt text you include is what will be read out to them to describe the image. And this is something you need to add to all informative, non-decorative visuals. So that includes pictures, charts, graphs, any visual content. When you're writing alt text for an image, you can keep it pretty concise. One way I like to think about it is if you were looking at a picture and trying to describe it to someone over the phone, what details would you include? What visual information is important to convey to that specific person? That is what you want captured in the alt text. You don't need to include the words picture of or image of at the start of your alt text because assistive technology will tell the user this is an image before reading out the alt text description. So you don't have to worry about that part. If you have a complex visual, like an infographic or a map, you might need to have a longer text description. Sometimes this can get linked to an appendix section or a web page to provide more detailed information about the visual if it's really critical for your audience to understand. I had mentioned that alt text needs to be added to all informative visuals, but what do you do with decorative visual objects? So things like shapes or graphics that don't really convey any useful information to the audience. In Google Docs, there is no built-in feature to mark objects as decorative. But if you're using the Grackle Docs extension, you can mark images as decorative, and I will demonstrate how to do that later today. Okay, so next we're going to talk about use of color. So there's two main practices that we want you all to think about. The first is to select text colors with sufficient contrast against your slide or document or website background. Contrast is the difference in brightness between your text color and your background color. So right now, the header of my slide has a maize or yellow text color for the title. That's my foreground color. And then my background color is the blue of the header. There are a lot of different tools available for checking color contrast. I have one linked in the slides that we'll demo later on, but you can use whichever contrast checker tool that you like. Um, Contrast tools will generate a contrast ratio for you. That is the contrast between the foreground color and the background color that you've inputted. And the magic number you are looking for is 4.5 to 1. That is the ratio that you need to meet. In general, we also want to try and avoid putting text over images. It makes it quite difficult to read the text, regardless of which color you choose. If you are adding text over background images, I would suggest either adjusting the transparency of the image so that the image is lighter and the text is darker, or vice versa, so that the text color pops out against the background and is easier to read. The other practice to consider with color is to avoid relying on color alone to convey meaning. So the idea here is that if you're using color to signal something to the audience, so like red for an error or green for good, you want to make sure there are multiple ways to understand that visual cue. So for instance, we have an image of a pie chart on the right-hand side of my screen with three different colors. And maybe there's a key that says orange is yes, blue is no, and green is maybe. But if someone is colorblind or can't distinguish between green and orange very well, the pie chart is now meaningless. We don't know which chunk corresponds with which label. One way to fix this in this case could be to add labels so that with or without the colors, we can still understand the data in the chart. If you're interested, there are tools out there to help with testing images to understand how they might appear for individuals with specific color vision deficiencies. Another trick that I like to use is to put my document into print preview mode and check how all of the content appears in black and white. You can use that to quickly gauge if the content still makes sense without relying on color. This is especially important if you have a document with a lot of colorful graphs or charts. Okay, our next topic is heading hierarchy. So, heading hierarchy is a set of heading levels that are used to designate sections in a page. So, we start with heading level one, that is visually the largest heading text, and then go to heading level two, which is a subsection, and then heading level three, and so on, all the way through heading level six. These names, heading one, heading two, come from how websites are encoded. If anyone has worked in HTML, you'll recognize that headings are tagged as like H1 or H2. They're essentially used to differentiate the text for section titles from body text on a web page. Proper heading structure makes a document more accessible because it organizes the content into sections and gives it a meaningful structure. So visually, we think of headings as bigger or bolded text, and that is what signifies a new section of the content. But when headings are properly formatted, that visual cue can be interpreted by assistive technology as well. Users can then actually navigate through the content section by section. So, our first best practice is simply to use headings for your documents. Try to be intentional about your heading structure so that they form a clear and logical outline of the page. So, just from looking at a high level list of the headings, you should have a good idea of what content is on the page and where it's located, kind of like a table of contents. Our next best practice is to use only one heading one for a single document. You can usually consider the heading one the name of the document. If we think about our heading hierarchy, because the heading one is used to designate the title, we don't want to have multiple heading ones in one document. That would get confusing. In Google Docs, you'll see a feature called title or subtitle. In general, we advise that you do not use this element. It might look the same visually as a heading one, but for assistive tech users, the title or subtitle element is inconsistent in how it works. It doesn't always offer that same semantic meaning of this is the name of the page. Next best practice is to not skip heading levels. So we have our heading one as the name or title of the page, and then the rest of the headings two through six make up our nested subsections. So essentially, we want to have a clear ascending order in place. So no jumping from heading level two straight to heading level four for your next subsection. I know that a lot of people tend to pick their heading styles based on the visual appearance. So they want big text for something, so they just pick heading level two. But design choices shouldn't inform which heading levels you're using. Choose the heading levels that make sense semantically and then customize how they look. Google Docs gives you a ton of flexibility and customization in how you style your headings. So you don't have to use the default sizes or text colors. And we'll look at that more during the demo. Okay. For text formatting, we want to make sure that we are picking legible, easy to read fonts. On the next slide, I will go over what an accessible font looks like. But a big thing to remember here is that font weight, size, and style all play a part in how legible your font is. It is also helpful to left align paragraphs of body text. This can make it easier to read and process large amounts of text content. We also want to create lists using the built-in functionality in Google Docs. This ensures that the list is formatted correctly and that it can be processed by assistive technology, which will tell users whether something is an ordered list, so sequential or numbered, or an unordered list, like bullets, in that they are reading a list of items and not regular body text. Last tip here is to add space between paragraphs using the built-in line and paragraph spacing. So this is an important one. A lot of times we just hit the enter key repeatedly so that there's extra space between our text. But this is something we want to adjust using the built-in spacing features. It also gives you a lot more customization and control, which is great. So, as I mentioned, we get a lot of questions about what an accessible font looks like. And it's not always easy to just say, make it 16-point font or only use sans serif fonts because readability depends on a lot of different factors. One way to judge how legible your font is by looking at the characters. So, are they distinct from one another? Do they have a relatively standard height and width? Are they too thick or too thin? And are there a lot of artistic embellishments that make it hard to read? This list of similar characters are ones that are usually tricky to tell apart if the font is not accessible. So if I'm using a new font typeface, I like to check between the number one, lowercase l, and lowercase I. If they all look identical in that typeface, that's not a good sign. Um, there's a whole list of good test cases here for you to reference. And then finally, these are a few recommended fonts. There are many more that are legible and accessible. We just picked some common ones like Arial, Calibri, Georgia. This presentation uses Verdana. The Atkinson Hyperlegible font was actually designed by the Braille Institute for Low Vision Readers, so that's a pretty cool one to use. Okay, and on to descriptive hyperlinks. So, hyperlink text provides information about a link's destination or purpose. When we refer to descriptive hyperlinks, we're talking about using the link text to inform the user where the link will take them. So, meaningful link text gives us an idea of what the link is and where it will lead us if we click on it. So, we generally want to avoid using links that just say click here or read more because out of context, they don't really make sense. I have no idea where the link will take me if I click on it. We also want to avoid using the full URL, like HTTPS colon slash slash, and then your full website name. If you're using something like a screen reader, that means you have to listen to that whole URL string of characters, numbers, and letters that don't always make sense or tell you what the web page is actually about. So use descriptive hyperlink text, something like the link we have in this slide, which is accessible links. And if I click on it, it will take me to a web page that talks about accessible hyperlinks. So well described. In Google Docs, they provide a shortcut feature after you copy and paste a link that replaces the URL with the name of the website or document you're linking to, which we will demo in a moment. The other aspect of this is that we want it to be easy to visually identify if something is a hyperlink. So for instance, with the link in our slide, I have a few different visual cues working here. I have blue text and an underline, and it looks different from the rest of the text on the slide. So I can pretty quickly say, oh, that's a link. even if it's not a URL. Okay, now we're going to move into the Google Docs demo portion. I have two short links on the screen. One is to make a copy of the Google Docs practice document that I am going to be using if anyone would like to follow along on their own device. And the second one is to view the accessible document checklist, which compiles a lot of the information I just talked about into a resource if you'd like to reference that as we go along. So I'm actually going to take a moment and click open, make a copy of this Google Docs practice document. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy there. And now I have our practice document open on my screen. It has a whole bunch of accessibility errors baked into it. And now we're going to walk through how to check and resolve some of those issues. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the heading hierarchy of our document. So there's a few different ways to check if you're using headings in your Google Doc. One way is to simply move your cursor over to a piece of text that you think is a heading. So I'm going to highlight the text practice document at the top because that visually seems to be the name of the document. So it should be our heading level 1. It's not regular paragraph text. So once I do that, I'm going to check the styles pane, which is in the main toolbar in Google Docs on the left-hand side next to fonts. In the text style being used for this piece of text is normal text and not a heading. So we know a heading is not being used here. Another way to check if headings are being used in the entire document is to go over to the left-hand side of the screen. There's a Show Tabs and Outline circle button. This lists out the different tabs of your document, but it also lists out the headings that you're using. So I can see that the headings list for this document is empty. Any headings that are properly encoded in Google Docs will populate over here as like an interactive table of contents. So we need to add headings to our document. We don't have any. So how do we actually do that? So I'm going to go ahead and select my text practice document, go to the style pane, and change it from normal text to heading 1. And just click on that. Once we do that, the text style updates to a heading 1, and it shows up on our document outline on the left-hand side. So we know we did it correctly. So that's great. However, I had made a bunch of specific styling choices with this piece of text. And now that it's a heading 1, it's all gone. It looks completely different. And that's because when you select the heading 1 option, it's going to use the default heading 1 text styling from Google Docs. So I'm actually going to click undo and go back to my old styling. And then this time, when I go to select heading 1 from the styles pane, I'm going to pick update heading 1 to match. What this is going to do is actually change the default text styling for heading level 1 in this document. So this is what we mean when we say, don't pick your heading levels based on the visual look. Choose the heading level that is appropriate for that section, and then customize the style however you want. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do that now. This practice document text is kind of difficult for me to read The Pacifico cursive font makes the letters really close together, not super legible. So I'm going to highlight my text, make whatever style changes I want. Maybe I'll pick a different typeface like Atkinson Hyperlegible, and then go back and I can update the heading level 1 style to match if I want. So visually, I can tell there are a couple other headings in this document. This practice makes perfect and sample practice schedule text looks different from my body text. And so I think they should be section headers. And because we just use heading level 1 for the document name, we should now use heading level 2 for these subsections. So I'm going to highlight practice makes perfect, go to my styles pane, and then do the update heading 2 to match just like before. And then I'll do the same to sample practice schedule. I'll highlight it, go to the styles pane, and just click heading 2. And now I can see that my heading 2s are populated in my document outline. If I click on these headings, they take me straight to the section in the text. And I can double check and see if my heading hierarchy is set up the way I wanted it. Okay, so back to our heading level 2s. They're also pretty hard to read. The typeface and the text size looks fine, but the color, this light purple on a white background, is not easy for me to see. I can tell it must have a pretty low color contrast. But we can check the color contrast ourselves and see if it's good enough or not. So I'm going to open up the WebAIM color contrast tool. I have it bookmarked in my web browser, and this will allow me to check the colors in the document in real time. So I'm going to click the color picker option and use this eyedropper tool to actually select the exact color from the document page. So I'll grab the light purple for my foreground. That's my text color. And then white for my background color. And we can see that the color contrast is way too low. We need it to be at least 4.5 to 1, and this is 1.46 to 1, so it fails. So I'm going to highlight my practice makes perfect text and pick a new color. So maybe I still want purple. I just need to pick a darker shade of purple. So I'll go ahead and do that. And once I've changed the color, I can go ahead and check again the color contrast. So I will use my eyedropper, pull in this purple shade, and it passes now. We have 6.51 to 1. So I'm good to go there. If you don't have the color contrast tool installed as a bookmark, you can also use the website version on webaim.org. And to pull the colors, there's a few different options. So you can do the color eyedrop picker, the same as I just demonstrated. You would just need to have your 2 tabs or windows open side by side so you can pull those colors in. The other way is to pull the hex code for each color and copy paste that into the website. To do that, in Google Docs, you can click text colors and then go to custom colors or add a custom color. And then you can select a new color with the eyedropper tool if you want something specific, and just copy this hex code. So I'll copy that hex value in, go over to the web aim contrast checker and just paste it in. And it does the same exact check as my bookmark tool did. Okay, there's a lot of other contrast checker tools out there as well. Um, I've just found this web aim one is easy to use for websites and Google Docs or slides. Comes in handy. Okay, so now we've got a better purple color for heading 2 text. Now I need to update the other heading 2. So in this case, it would only take me a moment to highlight sample practice schedule and just pick the same color. But let's say you have 15 or 20 headings in your document. Suddenly it's going to take a lot longer to go line by line and adjust each heading to. So one trick to make this a little faster is to update your heading to style. So I'm just going to highlight practice makes perfect, go to my heading 2 and update heading 2 to match. And now all of the heading 2s in my document will automatically update to look the same. So it can save you some time and manual effort if you have a document with a lot of headings in specific formatting too. Okay, next thing we're going to look at is list formatting. So right now in this document, I have a couple different lists. The first one is an ordered sequential list, so like 1, 2, 3. And the second one is an unordered bulleted list. To check if I'm using proper list formatting, I just need to move my cursor to one of my list items and then I can see if the list option is highlighted in my main menu toolbar. So I can see that for ordered list, this first one, it's not formatted correctly. But for my bulleted list, it is formatted correctly because I'm using the list option built in. So to fix this, I just need to highlight my list items and then select numbered list. Um, And now my list is actually formatted as a real list and not just regular text that looks like a list. So when I switched to the proper list format, I lost some of that white space that I had between my list items. Maybe that was important for me visually. I wanted there to be some padding between them. So to fix this, I know it's instinct for a lot of people to just hit the enter or return key and break up the space manually. But this can break the list formatting and cause some issues for users of assistive tech. So our solution is to just use the built-in line and paragraph spacing. So I'm going to highlight my list items and click line and paragraph spacing from my main toolbar. And then I can either use one of these default add space after list item, or I can choose custom spacing if I want to get very specific and just hit apply. Um, and then once I do that, I can double check and see that my paragraph spacing is set up correctly because when I highlight a list item, the space itself is attached to the line. Whereas with this space underneath the dashed list, the space is separate. It's not actually connected to the text itself. All right, so next we're going to take a look at descriptive hyperlink text. So I have a hyperlink at the bottom of this document. It says, if you are seeking more accessibility practice tips, click here. And the click here text is linked. So from this text alone, I have no idea where this link will take me if I click on it. So we want to add something more descriptive. So it turns out this link takes me to the U of M digital accessibility website. So I'm going to go back, select the click here text, and click Edit Link, and then change the text to something like U of M Digital Accessibility Website, and just hit Apply. And then I might edit the sentence so it actually makes sense. And that's it. That's all you really need to do to fix your hyperlink text. One other tip with hyperlinks is that if you copy and paste a link into your document, Google gives you a shortcut option to replace the URL with descriptive link text. So I'm going to just copy and paste the URL for the accessibility website and just paste it in directly. And as soon as I move my cursor over it, it gives me that replace URL with its title option. I can just click yes. So sometimes that really comes in handy if you're trying to add descriptive link text in. You just have to click the button. Okay, now we are going to try adding alt text to our images. So to add alt text, all you have to do is select an image, right click it, and then choose the alt text option from the drop-down list. The image options pane will open on the right-hand side of my screen, and in the alt text field, I just have to type my description in. So this is a practice document, of course, but in a real situation, the context of the image would matter. So for now, I might just write a woman practicing martial arts. But again, in a real situation, maybe I included the image because I wanted people to notice the specific style of clothing that she's wearing or the specific pose she's in, or something like that. So you want your alt text to be relevant to the rest of the document content, and to actually make sense with why you added the image in to begin with. Um, so yeah, there's a couple of other images inside of this document, but these ones seem to be more decorative, less informative. They're graphic firework colors at the top right hand corner. And in Google Docs, there's no built in feature for marking these as decorative. So I would have to just add alt text for each of them and just keep it very concise because they don't add any significant value to the content. However, using our extension tool, Grackle Docs, we can do that extra feature and mark them as decorative. So I'm going to show how you can actually install Grackle Docs in your Google Docs platform. So if you go to the accessibility website, you can search in Grackle and then choose the Grackle for Google Docs page. This page actually walks through more information about the tool and what issues that Grackle can scan for and help you fix. And just gives you more accessibility information about it. I'm just going to click Install Grackle and scroll down and just pick which extension I want. So in this case, I'm going to choose Install Grackle Docs. In my case, I already have Grackle Docs installed, but if you haven't, you'll get the option to install it here by clicking that button. And then if I go back to my practice document, once I want to run Grackle, I'm going to click Extensions from the top level menu and choose Grackle Docs and then launch. The very first time that you do this, it will ask you to log in with your U of M credentials, and verify that Grackle's okay to run. So just make sure you do that. Once it starts running, the Grackle pane shows up on the right-hand side of my screen, and it's running a scan of my document for accessibility issues. It might take a minute to finish running, depending on how complicated or long your document is. So now I can see Grackle has finished and it's identified some issues for me. So first off, with the images, it knows that we have a few images that either need alt text or need to be marked as decorative. So we can do that by clicking on the issue and then clicking the plus or add tag option there. This will open a pop-up window called Tag Positioned Images. And from there, I can click the checkbox for mark both of those firework images as artifact. That means you're marking them as decorative. I'm just going to hit update. And that's all I have to do. You will have to rerun the Grackle check if you want to see that information updated in the scan. And the other thing that we can do in Grackle that we can't really adjust in Google Docs is to make our tables accessible. So I'm going to scroll down to our sample practice schedule, and there's a tables issue flagged in Grackle that's saying we need to tag our table. This essentially means we need to set a column and row header. So visually, I can interpret that this first row, day, time, and task, and first column, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, are headers because they're bolded text and they have a blue color background that separates them from the rest of the table cells. But we want to make sure that assistive tech is able to understand that these are column and row headers as well, so that the data and information in the table is processed and read out correctly. So to do that, I'm just going to click the add tag option in Grackle, and the tag table pop-up window will appear. So in this case, my first row and my first column are my headers. So I can just click the checkbox, mark first row as header, mark first column as header. And that's all I have to do. If your table is more complicated, you can go cell by cell and select them and mark something as a header for either the column or the row, and do more fancy features there. Now I'm just going to go ahead and hit update because that's all I have to do. There's a lot of other things that Grackle checks for. You'll notice that some of them are flagged as actual issues in the red, and some of these are listed in yellow as like warnings. With things like color contrast or text styling, Grackle is going to try and warn you about making accessible design choices there. But it's really up to you to check and verify that by like following the best practices we talked about. Okay, so that is all for our Google Docs demo. I am going to hop back over to the slides. And now we just have a couple more slides to wrap up today. So we talked a lot about a lot of best practices and skills in the demo and presentation today. If you're feeling like, wow, that was a lot of information, don't worry. We have a document accessibility checklist linked here in the slides that compiles all of the information we talked about that you can just reference next time you make a new document or review an existing one. And just go line by line and make sure you have everything set and formatted correctly. It can also be helpful to run an accessibility checker like the one we demoed today, Grackle Docs, especially with some of the accessibility features it has that are difficult or not available in Google's built-in functionality. I think it's most helpful to use this tool once you've already added all of your content in. You try to follow the best practices in the checklist, then you can just run Grackle as your final check. Last note here is that a big part of sharing accessible digital content is about the format. So if you follow the best practices we talked about today, that's really all you need to do to make your Google Doc accessible. With PDFs, it is a much more difficult, time consuming, and technical process. They are not easy to make accessible, and so we generally recommend avoiding use of PDFs whenever possible. If you can share a view only version of your Google Doc, go and do that. That is much easier to do. And it makes sure that all of the great accessibility formatting and metadata that you added stays with the document. So when you export to PDF, you lose all of that and pretty much have to start from scratch with making it accessible. If you're not sure about whether you need to use a PDF or what other accessible options you have, check out our PDF decision tree. This will walk you through a series of questions that helps you determine whether or not you need to use a PDF and what alternative might work for your specific use case. If you do need to share a PDF for printing purposes or some other critical reason, make sure you provide more than one way for people to access that content. So, for instance, if I have an email with an attached PDF flyer about an event, I want to make sure I include all of the event info inside the body of the email or link to an accessible web page that has all of the event info as well. Okay, our last slide here is just a list of the document accessibility resources I mentioned or used today, if that is helpful for you all to reference later on. Um, Thank you all so much for listening and for joining us today.